Welcome back to Unpretty and Unfiltered. Last week, Brandon T took us through the chaos, what addiction stole, what it almost cost him, and how he clawed his way back. This week, the spotlight shifts to Andi C. At 12 years old, she took her first drink. By 20, the weight of it all drove her to a suicide attempt. For 12 long years after, alcohol and drugs consumed her every move, dragging her further into the shadows. But Andi's story is not just about the fall. It's about the rise, about survival, resilience, and what it takes to stare down the darkness and come back stronger. This is Unpretty and Unfiltered, and this is the story of Andi C. Andi, how you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Just trying to get everything set up here, but yeah, no, everything's been great. It was a busy weekend, for me at least. How was your weekend so
It was
far?
good. Mine was a little bit slower. I kind of laugh. I said at the beginning of summer that I was gonna have a really slow summer and like do a Bible study, and my summer has been anything but that. I have been on the go nonstop, but lots of wonderful things, lots of time with my family and cool experiences. So it's all worth it, but just taking my time to chillax when I can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on. First and foremost, Brandon and I talked about it last week, how this idea, excuse me, this idea of this podcast really just started in a recovery center when I was bored one day. I had a really good connection with this roommate that I was placed with. His name was David. And him and I just hung out 24/7, and he just got that. I mean, for anybody that's spent time in rehab, there comes a point in time every single time you go where it's like, I got to get out of here. And
Oh yeah.
I tried to talk David out of it for days on end, and it just came to a point where he decided to leave, and I was alone in the room. And you do the classes and you get breaks, and I was just bored and figured out, like, hey, let's just start a podcast, right? And I get out and think I'm going to do this alone. Obviously, Brandon joined, and Brandon's not able to be here today, unfortunately. But um, going through this, I set up a TikTok page for Unpretty and Unfiltered, and I just started scrolling through like accounts that had to do with addiction. And that's kind of how I found you, really. And
Yeah.
it was interesting. And you were, I threw out some feelers, to be honest with you. I threw out some feelers to a few different people, and everybody was just like, I don't know. It's a startup podcast. I don't know if it's going to do well. And like from the get go, you were just, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I definitely it's funny though cuz right I mean maybe a day or two before you had asked me, I had been talking to another friend about us starting a podcast. It's something we've been talking around or throwing around, a more faith-based one, but when you said it and just kind of described it to me a little bit, I am a big huge believer in all parts of your story being important, whether it be the good, the bad, or the ugly. And you know, I'm here to do anything to help someone on their recovery journey and help them to feel not alone. And I just think it's super important, and anything we can do to help people through that is what we need to be here for.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know we're recording this here today on Sunday the 14th. I won't be the one to spoil the surprise, but by the time this gets released tomorrow, I think a birdie told me somebody's got a birthday tomorrow.
Yeah, 28 months sober tomorrow. And I didn't even realize it until just last week, actually, that when you had told me the episode would drop on the 15th. And it was, just a little God moment for me. I think it's something super special and unique. And, you don't, as you go on in your sobriety, you stop counting every single day, but it's still an important thing to me. Every time the 15th of the month rolls around, it's always something for me to stop and celebrate and just, look at how far I've come and all the things I've overcome and all the things I still have yet to do.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear more over the next hour about, those specific God moments for you. I mean, I've had plenty of them myself in my recovery journey, but those God moments that we get, it's hard to explain to people that haven't gone through what we've gone through, but those little moments that just like that's what keeps you going, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
so it's definitely interesting. So,
It is. I definitely get hyped about them when they happen, and I'm usually
well,
the first one to fire off a text and be like, "You'll never believe what just happened."
and without going into too much detail, because I'll explain it a little bit later, but you and I talked earlier today on the phone, and I'm a big believer that God and Jesus Christ are like the key cog to recovery. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that even though it's a different topic and we're not going to go into it because it's not that type of podcast, but with
Right.
everything that's gone on in the world this past week, I mean, I think it's shown people that, God is always present in whatever situation that occurs in life.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
So, but yeah, I know you've got a lot of people that are excited about this. I'm excited about this. Like I told you earlier, I knew what to expect walking into that first episode with Brandon since I spent 30 days with him in a recovery facility here in Indianapolis. But I've not heard your story, and
Yeah.
I am so excited to hear about it. And like I said, I definitely believe you've got a voice and a story that deserves to be told the way you want to tell it. So um, just start from the beginning and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. I I just want to start with saying like I didn't grow up in the, I always say like I had a really good life. My parents got divorced at a young age, but I had both my parents in my life. I ended up with step parents who were good to me. I had everything I could ever need and usually everything I ever wanted, but I struggled with a lot of my life feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere and just always adapting to my surroundings to be accepted. And I think that's how my drinking really kicked off. I think I was 12 and we were down. I live in a really small town in northern Michigan, and all of our families were camping for our yearly summer festival. And um, my parents had gone down to a different family's camper for the night, and me and my childhood best friend knew that we could find some alcohol in their camper. And um, I remember going into the camper, and I had never tasted alcohol, did not know what I was doing, and I had grabbed two red Solo cups, and my mom had a half gallon of Bacardi under her sink, and I went in trying to be all sneaky about it, so didn't turn any lights on and just started pouring into these cups and topped it off with like a splash of root beer. And I don't know how we drank it, but we did, and I ended up obliterated. Um, my mom found me. I think I'd like ran into my aunt at the bathrooms or something, and I was just trashed. And I remember small parts of it, getting back to the camper, and I'm just puking my brains out. And my stepdad's at the other end of the camper, and I like sat up at one moment and just did this like swirl around it, passed out backwards hard. And looking back at it, I probably had some alcohol poisoning, and
Right.
it was not good. But I paid for it the next morning. We were to leave that next morning, and my mom made me get up, and I had to pack the camper up pretty much by myself while everybody else sat there and watched me. And you'd think after that I would learn my lesson, but I, it wasn't a super regular thing for me as I continued to grow up, but there were certainly times throughout high school that I was sneaking my parents' alcohol and, you know, doing whatever to steal some alcohol from a bottle and fill it back up with some water or
Right.
whatever the stupid things we do. And it was really just alcohol. I started smoking cigarettes. I don't know why, but as like a part of something to fit in. And it wasn't really until the summer after my senior year that I kind of dove deeper into it all. I was drinking a lot. I started smoking weed. I got into abusing stimulants and just spent that whole summer, like all I can remember was just partying, and like we didn't care where we were or what we were doing. Like we were just there to have a good time. And um I went to college at Elma to play softball, and I ended up doing a whole lot more partying than I did playing softball. And
Right.
it was a very expensive school to go to just be partying at.
Yeah.
But making it through my first year, was partying a bunch. I ended up dating the star of the basketball team. Thought I was super cool for a little while until I learned that he was just a big jerk. And that was my first encounter with a narcissist, and I didn't even know what that meant at the time. And it just was a relationship that spiraled me even farther into my drinking. And the more someone mentally abuses you and tears you down, the more you run to that drinking and other things to make you feel better. And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it just wasn't good. But I still was at that age that I'm just like, oh, this is normal, like everybody my age parties. And like, no, not everyone gets completely blackout drunk every time they drink. But that was what I did. And I ended up, after my freshman year, I transferred to CMU, which is a very well-known party college, and continued, smoking weed, drinking, abusing pills of whatever kind. Um, I think somewhere in that year, like I ended up going through a really bad breakup with this guy. And um, even though I had friends at CMU, at the time I was living with a girl I didn't know. We were very different. We hardly communicated. I felt super, again, like isolated and didn't know where to fit in, and just turned to the drugs and alcohol. I don't remember going to classes a lot. I remember a few, but school was not high on my priority list.
I was gonna ask, like, what kind of effect did the alcohol and the drug use have on your schooling?
Oh, I mean, again, like I remember some classes, but I think I was just BSing my way through a lot of it, and I was telling my parents what they wanted to hear, like, "Oh yeah, it's going good." And um, I think the only time that I would sit down to do homework was at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was doing Adderall or something to get me through to just pass classes just enough. But I wasn't serious about it. I was way more, into the partying, and I just didn't care enough. And I also, I struggled with depression and um, suicidal ideation for a long time. And it ended up being, I want to say it was somewhere around my sophomore year, right around, age 20, 21, somewhere around there. But I was super depressed. Again, living with this girl I didn't know. It was like coming home. We didn't speak to each other. It was awkward. Just went into my room every day, being alone, kind of thing. And um, that was my first encounter with a suicide attempt. I remember drinking in my room, and I just ended up taking any pill. I mean, anything from ibuprofen to like whatever, and just thinking like, if you take enough of something, it's going to end in a bad result, right? Like mix enough of all this crap together. And
Yeah.
so I did that, and I remember I ended up slitting both my wrists, um,
Oh.
and I obviously like lose consciousness. And I vaguely remember like my phone going off, but at the time I just remember feeling like, I'm not going to pick up. I don't want anyone to find me. I wanted to lay there until I died. And fortunately, I had friends who cared enough about me that they, after long enough of not answering my phone, they showed up at the apartment and were like, "Where is she?" And pretty much, broke down my bedroom door to get into me and found me laying in a pool of blood. And I remember just like begging them, like, "Don't take me to the hospital." Like, I did not want to go. I had zero desire to live. And obviously at this point now I'm like just embarrassed and everything, like it didn't work. They see me like this. It was awful. And they end up taking me to the emergency room, call my parents. My parents lived about 2 hours away, so they made it down. And um, I just remember lying there and like my mom's at the head of my bed just crying, like had no idea how bad things really were. Um,
And I think that's something, the audience, the listeners of your story here, eh, need to understand is like, as addicts and as alcoholics, we get to such this dark place. I'm pretty sure we talked about it in Brandon's episode. We get to such a dark place with our addiction, even as early as 20, 21 years old, like you were, that death feels like the better option than
yeah.
waking up tomorrow and taking another pill or another drink or whatever. And that sounds so counterintuitive to people who haven't lived the life that we have lived, but
Mm-hmm.
that just I don't know, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, but at least for me in my experience, like I've laid in bed so many times and just like drank enough and just prayed to God, like, please just don't let me wake up tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
that sounds like a better idea.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you end up hopeless. And I just, and it's not that I didn't have good things in my life. It wasn't that I didn't have good people. But no one had any idea how bad it was. And I was pretty good at hiding it. I lied about it all the time and like, "No, I'm good." And I was really good at putting on that face, in front of all my friends and like, "We're
Oh yeah.
partying, everything's great." And meanwhile, on the inside, like I was just dying. And um, after that happened, like I had to go to a mental health hospital for, it was anywhere like 3 to 5 days. I think I stayed there, and that was one of the most terrifying experiences, especially as a very young adult. You know, I'm talking like padded rooms and people that are talking to imaginary people. And I hadn't slept in a while. I was feeling awful from all the pills and alcohol that I had taken. And
Right.
um, it was an experience that, it scared me enough for a little while. When I left there, I ended up going to live with my mom and my stepdad for, I don't know, a month or so, not very long, because I didn't want people to know at the time really what was going on. I think all my friends had a pretty good idea, but I was still just, let's ignore the fact that this happened and just keep moving on. It's easier if we pretend this didn't happen and just go back to it. And I remember after it had all happened and I was back living at CMU, I'm in the apartment, and the person who said this to me is still a family friend. So if he ever hears this, I hope he knows I have no hard feelings. But it couldn't have been more than 2 months after I had done this. And we're back at my apartment that night after we'd been out drinking, and we're sitting there talking about it. And I don't remember how it got brought up, but he said something to me along the lines of like, well, I know you didn't really want to die, because if you did, you would have slit your wrist the other way. And
Wow.
I remember that just hitting me like, damn, like I can't even do suicide right. And
Really?
like that was just, you know, I know he didn't intend it that way, but
Still an incredibly awful thing to say to somebody.
yeah, it was hard. And it's been something now that like I'm very involved in, suicide awareness and prevention and anything I can do, because I think it's so important to learn, the vocabulary and things, that the way to handle situations like that better, so we don't unintentionally put people deeper into that pain that they're already feeling. But after that, drinking, drugging, everything, it all continues. I ended up, I stayed there for maybe another year, and then I ended up moving back to my hometown, and was dating a guy I knew from high school, doing the community college thing from home. It was whatever. He ended up graduating from college and moved out to Baltimore, and we broke up shortly after that. And it was like over a text, and just like this awful thing that pretty much my attitude after that was just like, fuck this and fuck everything. And I just didn't care. I wanted out, and I wanted somewhere to go that, that I didn't know anybody, and I could start a life that was free of everyone else that I knew. And one of my best friends from high school, she had been living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. And she came home for one of our summer festivals and was telling me about, how great it is, this and that. And I had just graduated college with my medical assistant degree, and was like, well, shoot, I'll just hop in the car, ride back out there with you and see what it's like. And so I did that, stayed for a couple of weeks, loved it. Um, Decided to fly home, get all my stuff, and move back out. And uh, it was amazing at the time. I'm in my early 20s. We're single. We're going out all the time. In Charlotte, there's a lot easier access to drugs and alcohol. And that was when we got pretty heavy into using cocaine.
Okay.
Um, just, it was a normal thing. And we, my addict mind, and like looking back at it now, I can see that like I was always like chasing that next high, and it never stopped, whether it was drinking alcohol, smoking weed, cocaine. I remember there was one time my roommate had gotten acid from somebody at work, and I have no idea about this drug. I have nothing, but I was like, screw it, like let's do it, it's gonna be fun. We do acid, have what I at the time thought was, the night of my life. And I remember saying to her, like, if I didn't know how bad this was for your brain, I would do this every single day. Because for the first time, like, I didn't care about the other things that were so painful. And I felt great. I was happy. We laughed the whole time. We did all these things. And that's, that's what got me. It was like, it was an escape from my reality. And I found it easier and easier as I was out there to come in, get connected with the people who had things that were going to make me feel better than the pain that I just kept burying down deep inside. And things were going great while I was out there, until I met a guy, one of her friends that she had worked with. He was actually, I would say, our dealer for most of the drugs we were doing at the time. And we, started out as friends. We both loved music. We were hanging out, drinking after work, doing all the things. It started to evolve into more. And, I thought he was just this like funny, charming guy who was my friend. He always was like talking me up that, like I was just great and all this, doing all the things to make me feel good. And
Right.
especially coming from like a spot where like I had just struggling with some abandonment stuff and like all these past relationships. And it's like, wow, like this guy just keeps talking me up here, building me up, and this is great. We're having fun together. We go out, like this is awesome. Um, I hate to admit that like I did know that when we first started hanging out that he had a girlfriend. And eventually like throughout our relationship that they continued, he ended up getting engaged to this woman and eventually marrying her. But I also was on the hook with him that he had mentally gotten me, like manipulated me to the point that I had blinders onto that at the time.
Yeah.
His his mental abuse was, pretty extreme, but it didn't take long for that to turn into physical abuse. And it took a while to get there, but I remember the first time it ever went there, I was working at this fine dining restaurant, and we had all of my coworkers decided to go out for a Christmas party, and so we're all out, and I call him, tell him to meet us there, whatever. And right before he gets there, me and all my coworkers stepped outside to smoke a cigarette, and it's wintertime. And so one of my coworkers had offered for me to borrow his jacket. And so I did. And when he shows up, like he sees this and just freaks out. He is the most possessive, controlling person. Like that was not cool. You would have thought something awful was going down the way he freaked out. And he starts to cause a scene, all this stuff. And finally I'm just like, let's go, we have to get out of here. I'm annoyed, and I had quite the mouth on me. I was miss independent, and I still would fire back my own nasty shots every now and then. And um we're going home and we're arguing the whole way home, and we get back to my townhouse, and I remember being upstairs in my bedroom, and I had one of these like tall oval mirrors, and I don't even remember. I know it started from like me wearing this guy's coat, but it is just like this obnoxious conversation. I'm so annoyed. And I just remember like hacking my arm back, and I haul off and punch this mirror.
Oh,
And
wow.
the second I did it, I turned and I looked at him, and I knew right then, like something in his eyes where like he knew that punch was meant for him. And all my alarms start going off inside, and I'm like, shit, you got to get out of here. And I take off running for the bathroom, and he chases after me and gets his foot in the door. And like next thing I know, he's got me slammed up against the wall by my neck. And it's still, even like talking about it now, it just seems unreal, like how fast things got there. And you always
Yeah.
think you're never going to be that person that, like, I mean, I was very much like, I will never let a man do this and that to me. And
Right.
here I was, and thankfully my roommate had come home like in the middle of all of this transpiring, and she was like banging on the door like, what is going on? And he worked with her at the time, so he didn't want her to know like what he was doing, and that stopped him. But it would just continue on for the next couple of years, and he didn't publicly do it, but it was anytime we're in the car, slamming me up against the window. And he had a hold on me so tight that it was, if I didn't do or say what he wanted me to, it was a threat on my life, or he was going to do this, he was going to do that. Over time, he got me so isolated from everyone, from my family. I remember there was an entire year, like I didn't speak to my mom or my stepdad. And a lot of it was because I didn't want them to know what I was doing in my life. Like we were selling and buying cocaine and doing all kinds of things. We'd be out at a club, and he'd make me carry his drugs for him. And I was paying for everything in his life. And, he, he had me under his thumb for sure, and just living out of fear mostly. And it was like every time that I felt like I was ready to say screw you and walk away, he'd, find a way to sweet talk me back into it, or, gaslight me into something. And it just became this never ending revolving door. Um,
That's that topic alone, you know, I got divorced 5 years ago. Um, right. Actually, it'll be 5 years next month. Um, and I was so blind to domestic violence, right? Like
yeah,
my parents have been married. Um, when they listen to this episode, they're going to hate me for not getting it right, but call it 40 years. Um, I've never like witnessed that. I didn't see it growing up. And, it wasn't a part of my marriage, domestic violence. And it wasn't until I got divorced and got into the dating world and I'd go on dates and I hear stories like this. And to me, like it's mind blowing, right? How like
right.
men in society, like this is a real thing
Oh, yeah.
and it happens all the time. I've got numerous close friends, female friends that have gone through very similar things that you've described. And every time I listen to it, like it just, I don't know, it breaks my heart because nobody, no man, no woman should ever have to go through something like that, like at all. There's nothing that you could have done or would have done in any given moment to give a man a reason to do what you just described.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you don't think you're going to be there. And because, you know, just the manipulation in itself, and because there were times that I would fight back, or like I would struggle through it. And like, I just remember the comments of like, he then made me believe that like I deserved that. Like, you fought back. So like, that told me you wanted this, and like that you wanted to fight. And it's like, at what point does a woman ever want to fight a man? And there were times that, I mean, he grabbed my arm so hard that like he'd instantly leave a bruise around me. And it just, looking back on it now, it is like, it's just amazing that I'm glad I made it out alive.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, the way you just said that's very interesting. And I'm not going to name names just for privacy's sake, but I mean, even within the last month, I have a female friend who is, I don't know where that stands at this point, but is in an abusive relationship. And I would be texting her, like, this is literally within this past 30 days. And she was like, well, I broke his nose. Well, like, yeah, you broke his nose because he hit you first. Like, you
Right,
broke his nose because, like, he slammed you against a wall. Like, I believe you're a human and you're allowed to fight back. Like, if a man puts his hands on you, then fully justifiable for you to retaliate.
right. Yeah, and it is. And it just, I mean, it goes back to like the amount of mental abuse and manipulation and the power that he had over me. And because I still, like, through all of this, not always, but I'm like, I thought I was like in love with this guy. And
Right.
it sounds insane now, like, trust me, I know it does. But I mean, I lost my friends. The girl I moved there to live with was my like best friend throughout high school and college. Like, we ended up not talking to each other. I was living with another friend. Like, I ended up moving out of there. There was a time I was living in my car, like, and not for long, but like I had all my stuff just in my car, and like was close enough with someone I'd drink at the bar enough to be like, hey, can I shower at your house or whatever? And like, never in my life did I think I'd be there. And this is all while I have like two jobs, but I'm so wrapped up in him. And he was giving him all of my money to pay for whatever he needed. And it's just a situation you don't ever think you're going to be in until you're in it. And you know, it just kept getting worse. It never got better. I ended up like getting a new townhouse in uptown, thought that was like, okay, I got this nice place, like we're better, whatever. He's married to someone at this time. And um, it was around December of 2018. I find out I'm pregnant, and I have no idea what I'm gonna do. Like, there's no way I can have a kid with this guy. I don't have friends here. I barely speak to my family. Have no idea. My stepmom was actually the only person I told for the longest time. They had come down to visit me for that Christmas, and I was like, I can't do this. And I'm not someone who advocates for abortion, but I went to a women's clinic and was like, what are my options? Because
Right.
like I certainly don't want to raise a child in this environment. And so we go through that, tells me my options. I'm like 14 weeks pregnant at this time, and I start to feel pregnant, like to have the cravings, all these things, and I'm torn between what to do. And unfortunately, I still kept drinking through some of it, because just because I was pregnant did not mean that I had any bit of my mental, emotional self in check, and that was the only way I knew to cope with things. Unfortunately, on New Year's Eve, I came home and, had gone out that night, came home, and I was standing with my friend, and I just remember, like, all of a sudden I feel like this warm down my leg, and I'm like, what is going on? And I end up going to the emergency room, and this is the worst term they could ever use, but they say you're having a spontaneous abortion. And in other words, a miscarriage. And they're like, we can't say for sure what's happening, but you pretty much just need to go home and wait this out. And so I did. And I, of course, then, I'm spiraling even more. Like, I feel like I have done this, I have caused this. It's all my fault. I have no idea what to do. My stepmom is still the only person, besides this guy that I was with at the time, that knows about this. And somewhere around January 9th, I ended up like fully miscarrying in my bathroom at home by myself. I am like just puking and awful. Like, I've never felt this much pain in my entire life. I end up calling 911, and they get me to the hospital, and this dude finally shows up as if he's there to support me. And I just remember lying in the bed, and I'm getting shots of morphine because I'm in such pain, and he's over there with like his feet kicked up watching TV.
Wow.
Just awful. Like, I feel like the scum of the earth. Like, the tragic thing I just went through at home is something that I still to this day am working through. And, we end up leaving the hospital, and this guy doesn't have his own car. Like, he drives me home, and after all this says, hey, can I use your car? I'm going to go DJ tonight. Just like, at this point, get away from me. But like, he also then asks like if he can have some of my pain meds that the hospital gave me. And I'm like, you are the worst person in the world.
After all this had just happened, this is what
After
the
all
response
this.
was?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
That very night leaves me by myself. And it was bad. Timeline of the next events that happen are still pretty wishy-washy to me, but I sometime within the next day or so end up drinking a lot. I meet up with him the following day, and we're out at this bar and hanging out. All of a sudden he gets a phone call, and he comes walking back to the bar, and he's like, what did you do? Just freaking out on me. And all I can say is thank God we're in public, because I had apparently in my drunkenness sent a bunch of screenshots to his wife. And he just starts unloading on me, and I get away from him, but it's when, the death threats start coming again, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
fucking kill you. Don't you try and leave. I have people watching you. I'm going to kill you, all these things. And, you know, looking back on it now, I don't think um, all of his threats probably weren't as, I don't know how real it all was, but in the time, to me, like, I was scared to death. I had no idea what this man was going to do. I didn't know if people were watching me or not, and I was terrified. Um, I remember going home and I just called my stepmom and I was like, "You've got to get me out of here. Like, I cannot be here anymore. I have to leave now." And she pretty much said, like, pack a bag, get an Uber to the airport, and I'm getting you on the next flight to Detroit. And I left North Carolina without saying goodbye to anyone that I still had at that time. But I just left. And my parents eventually went back for my stuff, but it was that was just such a hard thing. Like, you up and leave somewhere that you've been, and again, I'm terrified. Like, is he gonna find me? Um, I don't know. And I pretty much hide out at my stepmom's in Detroit for a month or so. I don't know. Um, Ended up getting a job at a bar just to like make some money, but working at a bar, there's a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs that go on there. And it was just the same thing, and I knew that I couldn't stay there. Um, Thankfully, my sister and brother-in-law were kind enough to invite me to live with them in Indiana. Um, and so I ended up moving to Indiana, um, live with them for a little bit, get a job, get my own place. And I would love to say that I cleaned up my act then, but I didn't. It just was a new spot for me to find friends that drank and did drugs too. And that's exactly what I did. It was easier for me to continue that lifestyle than to face reality of what had happened. And because I had been so isolated in North Carolina and stuff, my mindset was like, I don't have to tell anyone about this. Nobody knows. I can pretend like this didn't happen because nobody knows.
Yeah.
And I can just move on and cover it up with the drinking and smoking weed, doing cocaine, and um, I mean, making reckless decisions all the time.
Yeah.
I pretty much was drinking 24/7 at this point. Um,
That's something you know, I said it in the last episode with Brandon. I've been to a recovery center, rehab, whatever you want to call it, treatment. I don't know what the right word is these days, but I've been 8 times. And you always hear, I hate this term, but you got to change your people, places, and things, right? To get better, you got to change these things, or else you're
right,
never going to get better. But the one thing they leave out is the one person you can't change is yourself. Doesn't matter whether you're in California, Florida, Detroit, North Carolina, Indiana.
right.
Like, if you want to drink or you want to find a drug, a pill, cocaine, whatever you want to find, like, you take you wherever you go. And if you want it, you're going to get it.
Oh yeah,
So, like, that is one of the hardest parts of addiction, at least for me in my experience, is I've tried changing those things in various respects, not to the level of different states like you have, but definitely different parts of Indianapolis where I live, and it doesn't matter. Like, when I decide I want to drink, I drink.
yeah. And that's what I mean. It was. It's like I moved to Indiana and I found, you know, my new group of friends. But that's what we were doing. I remember one time, me and a girlfriend of mine, we were going to this Chris Brown concert downtown, and we were partying before we left the house, and we had stuffed mini bottles into our boots going into this concert. And I mean, we're in downtown Indianapolis by ourselves. We are plenty drank enough, and we're leaving this concert and like just walking down the street. I think we were like trying to walk away from the crowd before we called an Uber or something. And I we find ourselves standing outside of this bar with a group of guys that we have no idea who they are. They have a random bottle of liquor, and we're like, yeah, we'll take shots with you. And I'm just like, what were we thinking?
Right.
I have no idea. We had no idea who these people were, what was in this bottle. But at the time, we didn't care. And it was, it's that kind of reckless behavior that just comes with the territory of everything you're doing. And yeah, that went on for a while. I remember I finally like got to a point that I was at B-Dubs after work one day waiting for a friend, and I ended up like meeting this guy, and he somehow convinced me to go on a date with him, which is very not normal for me. I would never do, but I'm like, whatever, sure. So I meet this guy, we go out once, we end up, he had picked me up from my place, so he drops me off, and like he comes in, we're like doing some more shots or whatever, and I just started to get this weird vibe, and I was like, all right, I think it's time to call the night. Can you leave or whatever? And he like refuses to leave. He won't leave. I remember him sitting down at my kitchen table, and he's like eating the rest of his wings that he had or something. And he's just definitely bad vibes. And like I couldn't get him to leave my house, but here I am, like we had smoked weed, we were drunk, like I didn't know, like calling the cops didn't seem like a good option to me. And I just remember being up in my bathroom talking to my best friend Callie, and who's in North Carolina, by the way, like what is he going to do for me? But I was like, I can't get him to leave my house. I don't know what to do. Screaming at this guy for what seems like forever. He finally leaves, and I think that's the end of it. And it was just the beginning of a whole another nightmare. Telling the stories, I'm like, God, like who would believe like this crazy stuff just keeps happening? But the dude ends up stalking me bad. He created like several different accounts pretending to be different people. He was taking pictures outside of my townhouse at like 3 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy stuff. He ended up following me to my job. I worked for Versity Blood at the time, and I had gone to one of my managers and I said, like, he's trying to get a job here, and if you hire him, like, I have to quit. I can't be here. He is stalking me. He has threatened my life because I won't go back out with him. And they don't do anything about it. They end up hiring him, and
Of course.
yeah. And so I'm like, finally reach out to a friend. I'm like, I have never filed a PPO before. What do I do? I get all this information. Thankfully, I had some screenshots and things saved of threats he had, made towards me. And I filed this PPO. It's granted to me within 24 hours, but I've never, like, I met this dude for one night. So I don't have an address. I only had a phone number. I don't know how to get a hold of him. And he continues to send these threats to me. I'm terrified to the point that like I had a deadbolt on my bedroom door. I couldn't shower with the curtain closed. I was drinking myself to sleep every night because I couldn't sleep.
Was that here in
And
Indiana?
yeah, it was
I was
in
to say
Indianapolis.
the PTO, those are tough to get in Indiana. I've been down that route twice myself, and those are really tough to get.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and they granted it quick, but it was like then when the threats kept coming, I remember I was at my sister's one night and she was like, call the cops. And so I called them, and I think it was like two sheriffs show up at my sister's house, and they were wonderful. The one guy was like, if I could go find this guy right now, I would serve him this and I would give him a piece of my mind, like all this stuff. He's like, but unfortunately, until we serve this to him, we can't do anything. And as a single woman living by herself, I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. It was just awful. I ended up like I traded cars with my mom. I went back to Michigan for a couple of weeks and took some time off work, and actually ended up quitting there because I was so disgusted that they actually hired him after I had told them all this stuff. And didn't really know what I was going to do then, was in a pretty bad, dark place. But I ended up going home for a weekend and was at a wedding reception. And some of the girls I was talking to, we were talking about her brother that I'd like had a crush on in high school, and she calls him, is like, you gotta get out here. Andy's out here, da da, all this. Well, we ended up like reconnecting. I think life's great. We talk for weeks, end up starting a relationship. We were doing really great. I end up moving back to Michigan. But because I had not dealt with a single thing that had happened to me in the last 5, 6 years of my life, it what was something great quickly became not great. My drinking got even worse. I wasn't into the cocaine or anything anymore at this point, but my drinking became like I was buying mini bottles every day that I was at the store.
Yeah.
To the point where like this was the first time that I myself was truly like, okay, like I'm addicted to this. Like I, it's all I could think about. It's the only way I could function. And I just, not to sound like poor pity me, but I just was in this like spiral of, I felt like life wasn't getting better. I didn't know what to do. Like I ended up losing my grandma on my 30th birthday. I lost an aunt who was very close to me shortly after that. And I just spiraled even more. I was in a very, very dark place. Our relationship was not good. And we hit a point that, which I think was really, this was like the peak of when I hit and then started towards my downfall to rock bottom. But I, one night had come home, I had been drinking some, and I again was super suicidal. And I ended up taking like half my bottle of sleeping pills and hoped and prayed that I didn't wake up the next morning.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I did. Fortunately, actually, because this is like the event that I think led to, again, the big downfall that ended up getting me to rehab. But I was supposed to take his daughter to school the next day, and I just couldn't. I couldn't function. I could hardly get up, stand up, anything. So I just kept her home. And of course, I didn't want to admit to him or to his ex-wife that that is what had happened. So I lied about it. And oddly enough, like this was a memory that didn't come back to me until like maybe a year after I had been sober. And so we have like this big spiral fight with his ex-wife and all this stuff. And it didn't take long after that he ends up, telling me he can't do this anymore and walks out, never speaks to me or sees me again. And I don't blame him for that. At that point, he had to protect his daughter, but it definitely left me the most empty I've ever felt in my life. And at that point, I was still in this like, if I get sober, he'll come back thing. And I tried to get sober on my own, and it was not good.
Yeah.
I think I made it like 28 days, but in those 28 days, I lost 30 pounds. I couldn't eat. I couldn't anything. I felt miserable all the time. I remember one day, like I had just like puking every morning, and I was at my dad's house. He was out of town, and I literally thought I was going to die. Like my heart's doing crazy stuff. I can't see straight. I'm so awful.
Yep.
That I end up calling 911 because I don't know what to do. I know there's no way I can get myself to the hospital, and I've toughed it out before, but I never in my life had felt that bad.
Yeah. And we, as alcoholics, like we think we can tough it out, but it's one of two drugs on earth that you can actually die from the withdrawals.
Yeah,
It's the alcohol and the benzodiazepines.
right.
So when when your heart gets going, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been there too many times. You don't know what to do.
no. And I just remember like just crying and being like, I don't, I thought like at this point that I'm like, but I've been sober, like things are supposed to get better. And it's like, no, not after the way you've been, using your body for the last several years. And
Yeah.
um, so I, again, stayed sober for about 28 days. And I just, I don't know what it was or what triggered me again, but it was Mother's Day weekend. And I ended up, like, I remember that day, I was like, screw it, I'm going to drink again. And I went and I got 2 bottles, and I went to the spot where we had like spread my grandma's ashes. And I remember just sitting there and crying and drinking, and um, spent a while there, went home and just sat in my basement and just like chugging alcohol. And I, at some point, like very vague memories of this, but I remember texting my boss and saying, like, I can't do this anymore. I won't be into work tomorrow. And um, I don't remember a lot of what happened after that, but she somehow got a hold of my dad. Um, she knew, obviously, that I was mentally not in a good place. And, um, now I look back at it, I'm like, I know that was my cry for help. And because I know that if I wouldn't have, things wouldn't have ended well. And by the grace of God, my dad got me to the hospital the next day. And we spent about 11 hours there, talking to community mental health, and here's your options, here's this. And my sister drives up from Indianapolis, picks my mom up in Grand Rapids. They fly up, and I remember them. It's like you're laying there and the whole world was just like spinning around. I can like hear their voices, but I'm so exhausted and so mentally and physically out of it that I'm just like, whatever. Like, I didn't have much left in me, but I remember them telling me, like, you're going to rehab.
Right.
And you're going to rehab. And I remember crying, knowing that that's what I needed to do, but also thinking, like, what am I going to tell everybody? What am I going to tell everybody? And it didn't take long for me to get past that, but it's a hard thing, especially with all the judgment and stigma around all of this stuff, like that was hard for me to accept. But shortly after I got there, where I went, you have to spend a mandatory 24 hours in detox. And thankfully at that time I had already been sober for 24 hours. So the next day I go to residential.
Right.
And it didn't take long for me to feel like, okay, like I can finally admit that I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict and that I have a problem, because I was surrounded by other people that, we all have our own story, but
Of course.
it was the first time that I realized, like, I'm not alone in this. I have so many other people. And, you know, as tough as, I will never say that rehab is fun or, there's lots of horrible things that go along with it too, but
Yeah.
there's so many great things that came of it for me. I met so many good people, and it's how I found God. It's, when the rehab I went to on Sundays, you have an option to go to live church, online church, or to a meeting. And by the second week, I had a friend who really convinced me. She's like, I think you just need to give church a try. I'm like, okay, maybe. And that Sunday, my friend Miss Janet, we'd walk laps around the parking lot every day together, and she was just like the little Energizer bunny that talked me up all the time. And she that morning was just singing hymns in the shower and praising Jesus. And there was something about it that like intrigued me so much that I was like, I just gotta go and see what this is about.
Yeah.
And I went to church that day, and I remember sat in the back row. I felt like I did not belong there at all. Didn't know what I was doing. And from the very first moment the first song played, the hair on my arm stood up and tears just flood from my eyes. And like I felt a physical weight lift off of me. Like I can't explain it to anyone, but I know that that was him breaking my chains and setting me free. And I give him all the glory every day that I have not had the desire to take a drink of alcohol since the day I stepped foot in that church.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
it's
I
been
mean,
incredible.
it's those God moments like we were talking about earlier. They happen, and it's tough to explain them, but they definitely happen at some point for each of us.
Yeah, it was. And like you said, it was at that moment where I can still remember the exact moment walking down the hallway at rehab that like it clicked with me. Like, if you want your life to change, you have to change the way you think. You have to change the way you see things, the way you do things. Like,